online. It's a 23-minute read. You're sort of like, and you just don't have that in a magazine or a newspaper, you know. Anyway, you think you can come back to it if you want or whatever. Here we go.
Yeah.
My next guest has been covering the NFL since, well, I'll give you, how about this? We're talking about this is the 100th, the 100th season of the NFL. I guess you've been covering the NFL since it was their, if I have this right, their 44th season. Vito Stellino, VitoStellino.com, formerly Florida Times-Union, and a host of other papers from Washington Post to Pittsburgh Post-Gazette to the AP up in New York to, I mean, just you name it, Sporting News. I used to read his stuff in the Sporting News, and when he was covering the NFL, and he still does. And so, yeah, every now and then I want to talk to one of the great football writers of all time, Vito Stellino. And down there in Jacksonville, I guess, let's first talk about the Pro Football Hall of Fame. They had their induction ceremony over the weekend, and they also made the announcement that the senior committee, and we talked about this before, would have 10 men on it to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the league. You've talked about, for instance, as a contributor, I know Art Rooney Jr. because of the great drafts that he did with the Steelers back in the day, but just what was your opinion of deciding to open up the hall to make it maybe a little bit more inclusive and having 10 senior committee members in 2020? Did you think it was a good or a bad idea?
Well, I'm okay with the idea, although it's actually 15 because they're adding some coaches and contributors too.
Mm-hmm.
So 10 seniors. The problem is they're going to they're going to have some panel, 15 people, and they're going to bring them in the room and say vote up or down on all 15 instead of like doing each one individually.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the selectors are not too happy about that. I mean, if you're in favor of 13, but there are two of them that you don't think are all worthy, are you supposed to vote for them because you have no choice?
So now explain to me how this will go again. You caught me off guard here. They're going to put them in individually.
No, they're not. They're going to bring 15 people in the room as a group.
I see.
They vote yes or no on all 15 at one vote.
I see.
So there's a lot of questions about doing it that way.
Well, then I would imagine that they would have to bring in, 30 people or so just to have the top 15 put in. I mean, is that the way, or is it only going to be limited to 15 and then up or down?
15 up or down.
Okay. So it's a little bit different than, say, the Baseball Hall of Fame, where you fill out a ballot and you mail it in. The Pro Football Hall of Fame, all the men of football, let's say, and it could be Vito Stellino, it could be Ed Bouchette, Rick Gosselin, let's hear Howard Balzer. We've had all these guys on the show. These are great football writers, generally a beat writer, maybe a broadcaster. Dan Fouts is a contributor that, and he's a Hall of Famer, as a matter of fact, that also lends some credence to it. After all, he's been a very good color commentator over the years, once doing it on Monday Night Football, and certainly he knows something about playing against some of these potential Hall of Famers and such. So, he's in on there, and speeches are made oftentimes by the beat writer for the team that they covered. Has there ever been, I asked this once to Ed Bouchette, I mean, you're supposed to be objective when you're doing that, and forgive me if we're going through an old, something we've covered before, but, here you are, and Ed Bouchette, he's going to make an argument for a Steeler, or Rick Gosselin is going to make the argument for a Dallas Cowboy and all this. Doesn't that sort of lead into sort of shilling for your own team, in your own opinion? Is that truly objectivity in journalism in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, in your opinion, Vito?
Well, we like to think we're professionals
Mm-hmm.
and don't let our personal feelings, intrude on it. So I don't think that's a problem. I think the people who do it take it very seriously.
the one problem that I guess I always had is who would, argue for, let's just say, an Otis Anderson who played for the St. Louis Cardinal. I mean, if you're going to have the Arizona writer tell him, that's just a little bit, I've often wondered if that's why Marshall Goldberg, you talked about him, he didn't get in. Who champions the Chicago Cardinals? And so I think that when a franchise relocates and all that, it makes it that much difficult for the past performer to get in. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, Goldberg was a senior candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So the senior candidates, are picked by a small committee. So that's not the same thing, So, but when you have a person who covered the guy, who knows it better than that, So it. I just don't think it's a problem,
Okay.
Some of the presenters get frustrated because the other members don't see it their way.
Yeah.
So it's not a slam dunk that your guy is gonna get in. So.
Myron Cope gave up his vote to Ed Bouchette, I know, because Lynn Swann kept getting passed over, and it wasn't until Ed Bouchette made the presentation, I guess, that Swann got in. You know that very well. I guess I am somewhat surprised because, why wouldn't Vito Stellino? You covered Lynn Swann and all the... Ed Bouchette, he started covering the Steelers in '85. He doesn't necessarily, have that personal experience of, let me tell you how great Lynn Swann was. I assume he watched him on TV and such, but it is kind of a different thing. One thing that Bouchette once told me, Vito Stellino, is, I don't have to say you should vote for him. Has anyone actually presented and said, you know what, this guy isn't worthy in all your time on the Pro Football Hall vote?
I don't think that happens.
Yeah.
I think they tend to, may at least make a case for them.
Sure.
But I don't think, I can't really remember people saying, well, I'm supposed to present him, but I don't think this guy should be in, That would be pretty unusual.
Yeah, and I wonder, if the word came out, what kind of heat would that guy take, that sort of thing. Maybe he shouldn't, but because he's only giving his own opinion, but yeah, it's like, okay, that sort of thing. Anyway, Vito Stellino, you're down there in Jacksonville at VitoStellino.com, and I guess one of the news of training camp has been Jalen Ramsey pulling up in the armored truck, all this. What is your thinking of Jalen Ramsey? What is your take on that whole thing and coming up to the Jaguars camp in the armored truck?
Well, Jalen is Jalen. You know what I mean? He's a showman, so I'm not that bothered by it. I think the more the problem is he being disgruntled that they're not paying him the contract this year, and that Yannick is now also not getting a contract this year, so that has the potential to be a problem going forward. But I think our armored truck is just kind of a fun thing, so.
Yeah, and it was done back in the day. I remember Ted Hendricks once went to, Raiders camp by horseback, and all this. He's going to make his presence. It's done by a lot of players today, but it was done yesterday. But was it commonplace, or was it just done by, say, Ted Hendricks, who had a reputation for being a character? How much was it done back in the day?
Well, it just didn't get publicity that it gets now, And also, I don't think history of pro football anybody's ever done anything like this, So, but again, Jalen's Jalen. I think, people just kind of shrug and say that's just part of his persona, So I don't really think it's that big a problem.
How much of a distraction do you think it's going to be for the Jaguars? It seems like this is a team that can go either way. They were, less than 15 minutes away from going to the Super Bowl just 2 years ago, but a losing record last year. Blake Bortles just didn't have a new quarterback. How much of a distraction is Ramsey going to be?
Well, when he's such a good player, it's really just hard to say. You don't know what he's going to do the rest of the year. I think the player's a little more sympathetic to Yannick, who's only making $2 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
At least Jalen's made like $27 million in his first 4 years. Yannick's made, I think, think that his case might be more of a distraction, and that people are wondering, well, why isn't the team paying him? So I mean, they don't have to, but you tend to want to lock up your best players. So that actually may be more of a problem.
Do you think that defensive back, I mean, you think about who are you going to pay on your team. Certainly quarterback would seem to be number one, but, there is the idea of maybe you can get away with saving a few bucks in your secondary and all this. Do you subscribe to that, or do you think Ramsey's worth the money?
Well, he's your best player, so, and you got $188 million salary cap, so sometimes it'd be penny wise and pound foolish. I mean, this system is you pay your stars. I mean, half the team is making on their rookie contracts or the first 4 years. So when you get a star his caliber, you don't have much choice but to pay him, even if you have to overpay him. It sends a bad signal if you let a guy like him walk out the door.
Is Leonard Fournette a star? I think you've been a little critical. His yards per carry average maybe not that great, but certainly, I've seen him take off on these 90-yard runs, and remember what he did at LSU, and I don't think the Jaguars go to the championship game 2 years ago without him. What's your take there? He's taken a few knocks, but I still think that the guy is pretty talented. What's the deal with Leonard Fournette?
He's not a star yet because he hasn't played like a star. First year he missed 3 games, suspended once. Last year he was suspended, or he got called out by the GM in the last game for lounging on the bench and not showing very much interest when he wasn't playing. And of course, he also had an injury and missed half the season. Although they brought him back too fast, probably aggravated us. So I think this is a make or break year for him. He needs at least 1,000-yard season, if not more.
Okay, make or break for Leonard Fournette. And a lot of people might think it's, make or break what direction the Jaguars take, and certainly a lot of teams in the AFC South. Can you stay through the break? I want to talk to you about the AFC South, some other football news, Vito, and of course who's going to win the Super Bowl and that sort of thing. Hey, you turned us all on to the Chargers last year, so I'm curious who you think the surprise team will be this year. Vito Stellino on Tri-City Sports Now. I hope you can stay.